As Sarah's fingers turned black with frostbite and her unborn child grew still within her womb, the silhouette of an Apache warrior emerged from the blizzard like a death sentence turned salvation. His forbidden act of mercy would soon force them both to stand before a tribal council where spears pointed at her swollen belly and angry voices demanded blood for breaking their most sacred law. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The wind howled across the mountain pass, carrying with it the smell of pine and bitter cold. Snow fell in heavy sheets, blanketing the rugged terrain in a pristine white that gleamed silver under the winter moon. In this desolate beauty, Nakohe moved like a shadow, his moccasins leaving barely a trace as he navigated the familiar paths of his ancestral lands. For 3 days, he had walked alone, seeking visions and strength from the spirits that dwelled in these sacred heights. His quest had been successful. The eagle had appeared to him, circling 3 times before disappearing into the clouds, a sign of favor from the Great Spirit. Now, as he descended toward the valley where his people awaited, his thoughts turned to the warmth of fires and the stories he would share with the elders. The storm intensified, and Nakohe pulled his buffalo hide closer around his broad shoulders. At 32, he was in his prime, respected among the Apache for his hunting skills and quiet wisdom. The scar that ran from his temple to his jaw, earned in a battle with Comanche raiders years before, had faded to a thin white line that only enhanced his stoic features. Something caught his attention, a shape that didn't belong among the snow-covered rocks and twisted pines. Nakohe crouched, his hand moving instinctively to the knife at his belt. He remained motionless, watching, waiting. The shape didn't move. It wasn't an animal, nor a trap set by bluecoats or settlers. Drawing closer, Nakohe realized it was a person, half buried in snow, a pale hand extending outward as if reaching for help that never came. His breath caught. A white woman. Relations between his people and the whites had deteriorated with each passing season. More settlers arrived, more soldiers followed, more Apache land was claimed, more blood was spilled. Chief Mako had decreed that no white person would be welcomed in their village again, not after the massacre at White River, where 20 of their children had been slaughtered. Nakohe should turn away. This was not his concern. The whites had their own kind to care for them. But as he started to retreat, a soft moan escaped from the woman's blue-tinged lips. She lived. Against his better judgment, Nakohe knelt beside her. Snow had accumulated on her woolen cloak, and her face was deathly pale, except for patches of angry red where frostbite had begun to claim her cheeks. Her dark hair was frozen in tangled strands around her face. She couldn't have been more than 25 summers. When he gently turned her to assess her condition, the cloak fell open, revealing her swollen belly. She was with child far along, perhaps only weeks from birthing. "Shyla," he whispered, using the Apache word for brother that extended to all living things. 2 lives hung in the balance, not one. The woman's eyes fluttered open, revealing irises the color of summer sky. Fear flashed across her face when she saw him, followed quickly by resignation. She was too weak even to be frightened. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the howling wind. "My baby." Nakohe understood enough English to comprehend her plea. He had learned from a missionary who had visited their camp years ago, before relations soured completely. He knew what he should do, what the council would expect him to do. Leave her. She represented everything that threatened his people's existence. But as he looked at her face, at the protective way her hand curved around her unborn child, even in her weakened state, he could not. "I be still," he said in halting English. "I help." Relief flooded her features before her eyes closed again. Nakohe worked quickly, wrapping her in his spare blanket before lifting her into his arms. She weighed little, despite her pregnancy. How long had she been without food? He began the arduous journey down the mountain, each step carefully placed to avoid slipping on the treacherous terrain. The storm showed no signs of abating, and darkness would fall soon. He needed to find shelter. As he walked, the woman drifted in and out of consciousness. Once, she opened her eyes and studied his face with surprising clarity. "Sarah," she said, placing a trembling hand over her heart. "My name." "Nakohe," he responded, nodding slightly. "Thank you, Nakohe," she whispered before slipping back into unconsciousness. He trudged onward, the weight in his arms growing heavier with each step. Night fell, and still he walked, guided by an intimate knowledge of the land and an inexplicable certainty that what he was doing, forbidden though it might be, was right. By dawn, the storm had passed, leaving behind a landscape transformed. The rising sun painted the snow-covered mountains in shades of gold and pink. Nakohe had found a small cave where they had spent the night, keeping Sarah warm with a small fire and what little food he carried. Now, as he looked down at her sleeping form, he knew the hardest part of his journey still lay ahead. The village was another day's walk, and when he arrived with this white woman in his arms, he would face questions, anger, perhaps even banishment. But as Sarah's hand once again moved protectively over her unborn child, Nakohe made his decision. He would face whatever came. Some actions transcended the divisions between peoples. Some choices answered to a higher law than man's. He gathered her into his arms once more and stepped out into the new day. Sarah's consciousness ebbed and flowed like a tide against a rocky shore. Brief moments of clarity punctuated the haze of fever and exhaustion that clouded her mind. She was aware of strong arms carrying her, of the gentle swaying motion as her rescuer navigated the mountain trails, of the bitter cold that had given way to a dull numbness in her extremities. In these fleeting moments of awareness, fragments of memory returned, the wagon train leaving Independence, Missouri. 20 families bound for Oregon Territory, seeking new beginnings in the vast, untamed West. Her husband, William, with his ambitious dreams and gentle hands. The attack that had come without warning, not soldiers or Indians as they'd feared, but white men with bandanas covering their faces. Bandits who had no respect for life, who had taken everything. "William," she murmured, tears freezing on her cheeks. Nakohe glanced down at her, his dark eyes unreadable. He did not understand the name, but he recognized the grief etched into her features. He had seen that same expression on the faces of his own people too many times. By midday, they had descended into a valley where the snow lay less deep. Nakohe stopped beside a small stream, its surface partially frozen, but still flowing beneath. He gently set Sarah down against a boulder, ensuring the buffalo hide remained wrapped securely around her. "Drink," he said, cupping water in his hands and bringing it to her lips. Sarah drank gratefully, the icy water reviving her slightly. Her blue eyes focused on his face, studying the strong lines of his jaw, the scar that told of battles fought, the weathered skin that spoke of a life lived beneath the open sky. "The others," she said weakly. "My wagon train. Did you see?" Nakohe shook his head. "No others, only you." Sarah closed her eyes, fresh grief washing over her. After the attack, the survivors had continued westward, but William had been among the dead. 8 months with child and newly widowed, she had been taken in by the Petersons, a kindly couple who had lost their own daughter years before. 3 days ago, their wagon had broken an axle on the treacherous mountain path. John Peterson had gone ahead with the others to find help, promising to return quickly. Sarah had insisted they go, seeing how the cold affected Martha Peterson's frail health, but the snow had come, sudden and merciless. Sarah had attempted to follow on foot when no one returned, only to become disoriented in the blinding white. "My baby," she whispered, her hand moving to her belly where a reassuring kick answered her touch. "Thank God." Nakohe understood her gratitude. He offered her dried meat from his pouch, watching as she ate slowly, deliberately, like one who knew the value of each morsel in this unforgiving land. "How far?" she asked when she had finished. "To my people. 1 day," Nakohe replied, his expression growing solemn. "But you're not welcome there." Sarah's eyes widened with understanding and fear. "Then why?" "Great Spirit values all life," he said simply. Though they both knew his explanation would not satisfy his tribe, he helped her to her feet. "We must continue." As they resumed their journey, Sarah found some strength returning to her limbs, though she still leaned heavily on Nakohe. They walked in silence for a time, each lost in thought about what awaited them. "They will be angry with you," Sarah finally said. It wasn't a question. Nakohe nodded. "Yes, I'm sorry." He looked at her then, his gaze direct and unflinching. "Do not be sorry for living." The simplicity of his statement moved her deeply. This man who owed her nothing had risked everything to save her and her unborn child. She had been raised on stories of savage Indians who scalped settlers and burned homesteads, yet here was a man displaying more humanity than many who claimed civilization. As the afternoon sun began its descent toward the horizon, Nakohe became increasingly alert, scanning their surroundings with practiced eyes. They were nearing Apache territory, and hunting parties might be abroad. "If we meet others," he instructed her, "you stay behind me. Speak only if spoken to." Sarah nodded, understanding the precariousness of their situation. She had become a burden he had chosen to bear, though she hadn't asked it of him. They made camp that night in a sheltered hollow, the small fire Nakohe built, casting dancing shadows on the rock face behind them. Sarah watched as he moved with efficient grace, gathering wood, checking the perimeter, preparing a simple meal from his dwindling supplies. "Why were you alone on the mountain?" she asked as he settled across from her, the fire between them. "Vision quest," he replied, "to seek guidance from ancestors. Did you find it? Guidance?" A faint smile touched his lips. "I found you." Sarah wasn't sure if that was an answer or an evasion, perhaps both. "My husband died 3 months ago," she said after a pause, needing to speak of William, to make him real again through words. He was a good man. He wanted to build something in Oregon, a place for our child to grow free." Nakohe listened silently, his face impassive but his eyes attentive. "I don't know what I'll do now," she admitted, her hand resting on her belly. "First, live," Nakohe said simply, "then decide." As the night deepened around them and stars emerged in the vast expanse above, Sarah found an unexpected comfort in his presence. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, the village, his people's anger, her uncertain future. But for now, in this moment suspended between two worlds, there was a strange peace. Nakohe watched as she drifted into sleep, her features softened in the firelight. He had answered the call of compassion, but as he gazed into the flames, He wondered if he had heard the spirits correctly. Or if, perhaps, they had led him to this woman for reasons he had yet to understand. Morning arrived with a tentative warmth as the sun crested the eastern mountains. Nakohe was already awake, his alertness honed by years of survival in territories where danger could come from any direction. He had slept little, keeping watch over the woman whose life now rested in his hands. Sarah stirred, her body aching from the cold and exertion. The baby within her kicked vigorously, a reassuring reminder of life's persistence even in the harshest circumstances. She looked up to find Nakohe watching her, his expression unreadable. "We go now," he said, extinguishing the last embers of their fire. "Village close." Sarah nodded, accepting his outstretched hand as she struggled to her feet. Her swollen ankles protested, but she bit back any complaint. This man had already risked enough for her. She would not burden him with weakness. They walked in silence through a landscape that gradually transformed from the stark white of snow-covered mountains to the muted browns and greens of the valley below. Pine gave way to juniper and sage, and the air grew marginally warmer as they descended. Around midday, Nakohe suddenly halted, raising his hand for silence. His posture changed, tension evident in the set of his shoulders. Sarah followed his gaze, but saw nothing in the scatter of rocks and brush ahead. "What is it?" she whispered. "Scouts," he replied, his voice low. "They watch us." As if summoned by his words, two Apache warriors materialized from behind an outcropping of rock, bows at the ready, their faces painted with ochre streaks that accentuated fierce expressions. They wore buckskin leggings and shirts, with colorful beaded headbands holding back their long black hair. Words were exchanged in the Apache language, sharp, questioning sounds that Sarah couldn't understand. Nakohe responded calmly, though she could sense the underlying tension in his voice. One of the scouts gestured angrily toward her, his expression darkening as he spoke. "Stay here," Nakohe instructed her, stepping forward to address the scouts more directly. The conversation grew heated. The younger of the two scouts jabbed a finger in Sarah's direction, his voice rising. Nakohe remained composed, but his hand had drifted closer to the knife at his belt, not a threat, but a reminder of his status within the tribe. Finally, after what seemed an eternity to Sarah, the scouts nodded curtly. With one last suspicious glance in her direction, they melted back into the landscape as silently as they had appeared. "What happened?" Sarah asked when Nakohe returned to her side. "They go to tell Chief Mako we come," he explained. "They not happy I bring white woman? Will they hurt us?" Nakohe considered her question. "Not us. Me, perhaps. You." He paused. "They will decide." The implication hung heavy between them. Sarah instinctively wrapped her arms around her belly, as if she could shield her unborn child from the hatred awaiting them. "We must continue," Nakohe said, his voice gentler than before. "Better to face what comes than to delay." They resumed their journey, the silence now laden with unspoken fears. Sarah found herself studying Nakohe's profile, wondering what had compelled this warrior to defy his people's customs for a woman he didn't know, a woman whose kind had brought so much suffering to his... "Your people," she ventured after a time. "Have they always lived here?" Nakohe glanced at her, perhaps surprised by her interest. "Always. Since Great Spirit placed first man and woman on this land, it's beautiful," she said, gazing at the rugged landscape that stretched before them. "Different from where I came from. In Kentucky, there are forests so thick the sun barely reaches the ground and rivers wide enough that you can't see the other side." He nodded, acknowledging her words without comment. After another stretch of silence, he said, Why you come west? This dangerous place for women alone. I wasn't alone when we started, Sarah replied, a familiar ache blossoming in her chest. William, my husband, had a dream of land that belonged to us, where no one could tell us how to live. When he died, She trailed off, unsure how to explain the complex mixture of grief, determination, and fear that had driven her to continue the journey. I couldn't go back. There was nothing for me there. Nakohe seemed to understand, sometimes path forward only choice, even when path hard. Yes, Sarah agreed, surprised by his insight. Exactly that. As the afternoon wore on, signs of human habitation began to appear, a well-worn trail, remnants of a recent hunt, smoke rising in the distance. Sarah's apprehension grew with each step that brought them closer to the Apache village. Finally, they crested a small rise, and the settlement lay before them. It was nestled in a protected valley, with a stream running alongside. Wickiups, dome-shaped dwellings made of brush and grass over a framework of poles, were arranged in a circular pattern. Women worked outside, tanning hides or grinding corn, while children played between the structures. Men sat in groups, repairing weapons or discussing matters of importance. All activities ceased as Nakohe and Sarah appeared on the ridge. Faces turned toward them, expressions shifting from curiosity to shock to anger as the villagers registered the white woman's presence. "Stay close," Nakohe murmured, leading her down the slope toward the village. A crowd began to gather, forming a gauntlet through which they must pass. Hostile murmurs rippled through the assembled Apache. Sarah felt the weight of their stares like physical blows. A few women spat on the ground as she passed, while warriors fingered their weapons, their intentions clear in the hardness of their eyes. Nakohe walked steadily, his head high, seeming neither ashamed of his actions nor intimidated by his people's reaction. Sarah tried to emulate his dignity, though fear threatened to overwhelm her. A tall, imposing figure awaited them at the center of the village. An older man, with a face weathered by sun and experience, his long hair streaked with gray. He wore a necklace of bear claws and a shirt adorned with intricate beadwork that marked his status. This, Sarah knew without being told, was Chief Mako. Beside him stood a younger warrior whose resemblance to the chief suggested kinship. His face was contorted with barely controlled rage, his hand resting on the hilt of a knife. "Nakohe," the chief said, his deep voice carrying across the suddenly silent village. "You bring enemy to our home." "I bring woman who needs help," Nakohe replied in English, perhaps for Sarah's benefit. She carried child. "Would die in mountains without aid. Better she die than bring bluecoats to our door," the younger warrior snarled, also switching to English. "Have you forgotten White River, the children slaughtered, our lands stolen?" "I forget nothing, Takoda," Nakohe responded evenly. "But this woman not responsible." "All whites responsible," Takoda shouted, taking a step forward. "All must pay." Chief Mako raised his hand, silencing his son. His dark eyes settled on Sarah, studying her with a gaze that seemed to penetrate to her very soul. "Council will decide," he pronounced finally. "Tonight, when sun sets. Until then, she stay in Medicine Woman's wickiup, guarded." Nakohe nodded, accepting the chief's decree. He turned to Sarah, his expression softening slightly. "You be safe here. Kiona will care for you." An elderly woman emerged from the crowd, her face deeply lined but her eyes kind. She approached Sarah without fear, taking her arm and leading her toward one of the dwellings. As Sarah was led away, she glanced back at Nakohe, who stood alone now before his tribe. She saw in the rigid set of his shoulders and the calm defiance in his stance that he had known exactly what awaited him when he chose to save her, and had done so anyway. The realization humbled her. In that moment, she silently vowed that whatever came next, she would face it with the same courage he had shown. She owed him that much, at least. The medicine woman's wickiup was unexpectedly spacious inside, the air fragrant with the scent of dried herbs and smoke from a small central fire. Bundles of plants hung from the curved poles of the framework, and various pouches, containers of clay and horn, and ceremonial items were arranged with careful precision around the perimeter. Kiona gestured for Sarah to sit on a bed of soft furs spread near the fire. The old woman's face was a map of deep lines and ancient wisdom, her movements deliberate yet graceful despite her advanced years. Though they shared no common language, her gentle touch as she examined Sarah's frost-nipped fingers and swollen ankles conveyed compassion that transcended words. "Thank you," Sarah said, knowing the woman might not understand but needing to express her gratitude nonetheless. Kiona's dark eyes, still sharp and clear in her weathered face, studied Sarah with a mixture of curiosity and caution. She reached out and placed a gnarled hand on Sarah's rounded belly, waiting until the baby kicked in response. A smile transformed her features, softening the wariness that had been there moments before. "Strong," she said in heavily accented English, surprising Sarah. Strong like mother. Outside, Sarah could hear the continued murmurs of the village, occasionally punctuated by raised voices. The sound of her fate being debated by strangers made her shiver despite the fire's warmth. Kiona noticed and wrapped a woven blanket around Sarah's shoulders before turning to prepare a tea from some of the dried plants. As she worked, she began to speak, her voice low and melodic, switching between English and Apache as if testing which words Sarah might understand. Nakohe, brave warrior, respected. His father was shaman before crossing to spirit world. Mother from Bear Clan. Strong blood. She handed Sarah a wooden cup filled with steaming liquid. Drink, good for baby. Sarah accepted the tea gratefully, inhaling its earthy aroma before taking a cautious sip. It was bitter but not unpleasant, with hints of mint and something deeper she couldn't identify. "Nakohe not married?" Sarah asked, then immediately regretted the question. It shouldn't matter to her, and yet... Kiona's eyes twinkled knowingly. "Was to marry Amma, daughter of Wolf Clan leader. She died of fever 2 winters past." The old woman's expression grew solemn. Since then, Nakohe's heart closed. Until now, perhaps, Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks and focused intently on her tea. "He saved my life. I owe him everything." Kiona's non-committal response suggested she perceived more than Sarah intended to reveal. "Nakohe see with different eyes than others. Where some see enemy, he see person. This make him strong. Also make him alone sometimes." A young woman entered the wickiup, carrying a clay bowl of stew and a suspicious expression. She set the food down near Sarah without meeting her eyes and exchanged rapid words with Kiona before departing. "Eat," Kiona instructed, pushing the bowl toward Sarah. "Niece, not trust white woman, but she obey elder." Sarah ate slowly, savoring the rich broth and tender meat. After days of near starvation, the simple meal seemed a feast fit for royalty. As she ate, Kiona continued to speak, telling her about the village, the seasons of planting and hunting, the ceremonies that marked the rhythm of Apache life. Despite her situation, Sarah found herself fascinated. The life Kiona described was so different from anything she had known, yet in many ways familiar. The same human concerns for family, food, shelter, and meaning that drove all communities. "Your husband," Kiona said abruptly, changing topics. "A good man?" Sarah nodded, swallowing a sudden lump in her throat. "Yes, kind, hard-working. He wanted our child to have a better life than we had." "All mothers want this," Kiona agreed. "Apache, white, same." She studied Sarah intently. "Child comes soon, within moon cycle." "Yes," Sarah confirmed, placing a hand on her belly. "My time is near." Kiona reached for a pouch and sprinkled something into the fire, causing fragrant smoke to rise. "I pray to spirits for safe birth," she explained. "All children sacred gifts." Sarah was moved by this unexpected kindness. "You do that for me?" "Even though I'm white," the old woman's expression grew distant, her eyes reflecting memories of sorrows long past. "I lose 3 children to white man's disease, 2 grandchildren to blue-coat bullets." Her gaze returned to Sarah, penetrating but not accusatory. "But hate solve nothing, new life always hope." Their conversation was interrupted by commotion outside. The light filtering through the wiki-up entrance had dimmed, indicating evening's approach. The council would soon convene to decide Sarah's fate, and Nakohe's. Kiona rose stiffly to her feet. "Rest now. I go prepare healing herbs for after." "After what?" Sarah asked, anxiety rising anew. The medicine woman's face revealed nothing. "After council decides." Either way, someone need healing tonight. Left alone, Sarah fought against mounting fear. She had no illusions about her position. To these people, she represented everything that threatened their existence, every broken treaty, every stolen acre of land, every act of violence committed against them by white settlers and soldiers, and Nakohe had risked everything to bring her here. She was startled from her thoughts by the entrance of a young boy, perhaps 10 years old, who slipped quietly into the wiki-up. He carried a small leather pouch, which he thrust toward her without speaking. "For me?" Sarah asked, confused. The boy nodded solemnly. "From Nakohe," he whispered in halting English. "He say give to you before council." With that, he turned and disappeared as silently as he had come. Sarah opened the pouch with trembling fingers. Inside was a small carved figure, an eagle in flight, its wings outstretched, crafted with remarkable detail from a piece of antler. A thin strip of leather threaded through a hole allowed it to be worn as a pendant. She traced the figure's contours, understanding this was no casual gift. Nakohe had mentioned seeing an eagle during his vision quest. This carving represented something deeply personal, a talisman of protection perhaps, or a symbol of freedom and strength. Sarah slipped the leather cord over her head, tucking the eagle beneath her dress where it rested against her heart. Whatever happened in the coming hours, she would face it carrying this token of the man who had saved her, a man who had looked beyond the color of her skin to see her humanity. Outside, drums began to beat, their steady rhythm announcing the gathering of the council. Sarah closed her eyes, one hand on her belly where her child moved restlessly, the other clutching the carved eagle. "Give me strength," she whispered, unsure whether she was addressing God, the spirits Kiona had invoked, or the absent Nakohe himself. The drumbeats intensified, and with them, Sarah's resolve. She would not cower before the council. For her child's sake, for her own dignity, and for the faith Nakohe had placed in her, she would stand tall and speak her truth, even if no one was willing to hear it. The council fire burned high in the center of the village, its flames reaching toward the darkening sky like grasping fingers. Around it sat the tribal elders and warriors, their faces solemn in the flickering light. The women of the village gathered behind them, silent observers whose influence, though less visible, would be felt in the deliberations to come. Nakohe stood alone on one side of the fire, his posture straight and proud despite the weight of his tribe's scrutiny. He had changed into ceremonial attire, a buckskin shirt adorned with porcupine quills and beadwork, leggings with fringe that swayed gently in the evening breeze, and a single eagle feather tied into his hair. Chief Mako sat directly across from him, flanked by his son Takoda and 3 tribal elders, whose white hair and deeply lined faces spoke of decades of wisdom. The chief wore his full ceremonial regalia, including a magnificent headdress and a breastplate of polished bone tubes that gleamed in the firelight. Sarah was led from Kiona's wickiup by 2 stern-faced warriors who positioned her several paces behind Nakohe. She stood with her head high, one hand resting protectively on her belly, the other clutching the carved eagle pendant beneath her dress. The villagers' eyes followed her every movement, their expressions ranging from open hostility to guarded curiosity. Kiona took a position near the edge of the circle, close enough to observe but not directly involved in the proceedings. Her ancient eyes met Sarah's briefly, offering silent support. Chief Mako raised his hand, and silence fell over the gathering. He spoke in Apache for several minutes, his deep voice carrying authority that required no translation. When he finished, he nodded to Takoda, who stepped forward. "For those who do not speak our sacred tongue," Takoda said in English, his voice tight with barely controlled anger, "I will say what all here know. Nakohe has broken our most sacred law by bringing a white woman into our village. The same whites who hunt us like animals, who steal our lands, who kill our children." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. "The law is clear," Takoda continued. "Any who endanger the tribe must be cast out. Any who betray our trust must face punishment." He turned to face Nakohe directly. "Speak then. Tell us why you have done this thing." Nakohe surveyed the faces of his people, taking time to meet the eyes of the elders, the warriors, and finally Chief Mako himself. When he spoke, his voice was calm and measured. "I found this woman in the mountains, dying in the snow. She carries a child who has done no wrong to any of us." He gestured toward the sky. "The eagle appeared to me during my vision quest, 3 times circling before flying toward where I would find her. The spirits led me to her." Skeptical whispers spread among the warriors, but Nakohe continued undeterred. "Our ancestors taught us that all life is sacred, that a warrior's strength is measured not only by enemies defeated, but by the weak he protects." His gaze swept over the assembly again. "I could not leave her to die. Not and still call myself Apache." Takoda scoffed openly. "Pretty words to disguise a traitor's heart. The whites would not extend such mercy to any of us." "Then we become what we hate," Nakohe countered evenly. "Is that what you wish, Takoda? For us to lose our way, to abandon what makes us Apache?" Before Takoda could respond, one of the elders spoke up, his voice cracking with age, but still commanding respect. "Old Nakohe speaks of our old ways, before the whites came, but we live in different times now. Each white face in our territory brings danger to all." "This woman is alone," Nakohe argued. "She has no weapon, no means to harm us." "She has eyes," another warrior called out. "Eyes that see our defenses, our numbers, our ways. Eyes that can guide soldiers to us when she returns to her people." Chief Mako raised his hand for silence, then turned his penetrating gaze to Sarah. "Woman," he said in English, "why were you in our mountains? Speak truth." Sarah swallowed hard, conscious of every eye upon her. The eagle pendant seemed to grow warm against her skin, giving her courage. "My name is Sarah Hollister," she began, her voice steadier than she had expected. "I was traveling with a wagon train bound for Oregon Territory. My husband died when we were attacked by bandits 3 months ago." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "Our wagon broke down in the mountains. The others went for help, but never returned. I tried to follow on foot, but the storm came." "And what will you do if we let you live?" Dakota demanded. "Run to the nearest fort." "Tell soldiers of our location." Sarah met his hostile gaze directly. "No, I have seen what soldiers do to your people. I want no part in that." She took a deep breath. "I only want to deliver my baby safely and find a place where we can live in peace." "Peace?" Dakota spat the word like a curse. "There is no peace between our peoples, only war that ends when one side is destroyed." "Enough, my son," Chief Mako said firmly. He studied Sarah thoughtfully. "Why should we believe you will not betray us, white woman?" Before Sarah could answer, an unexpected voice rose from the crowd. Kiona stepped into the circle, her age-bent frame straightening as she addressed the council. "I have read this woman's spirit," the medicine woman declared. "There is no lie in her. The child she carries is strong, a fighter, like our people." She turned to face the chief. "Until in the old days, before the troubles with whites began, those who sought refuge among us could earn a place through adoption, if they proved worthy." Shocked murmurs spread through the gathering. What Kiona suggested was almost unthinkable, that Sarah might remain among them, not as prisoner but as something approaching a member of the tribe. "This is madness," Dakota protested loudly. "She is white. She is a mother," Kiona retorted. "As was your grandmother, who welcomed a Navajo woman into our tribe when she fled her abusive husband. Are we Apache, or are we animals who have forgotten compassion?" The circle fell silent, the challenge hanging in the air like the smoke from the council fire. Chief Mako's expression revealed nothing of his thoughts as he weighed the words spoken, the traditions invoked, and the unprecedented situation before him. The fire crackled in the tense silence, sending sparks spiraling upward into the star-filled night. Chief Mako rose to his feet, his imposing figure silhouetted against the flames. The council had deliberated through the night, voices rising and falling like the wind through canyon walls. Now, as the first pale light of dawn touched the eastern horizon, the time for decision had come. "And I have listened to all voices," he announced, his deep voice carrying across the silent gathering. "To the warriors who speak of danger, to the elders who speak of tradition, to the medicine woman who speaks of compassion." His eyes settled on Nakohe, "and to the man who followed his vision, even knowing the cost." Sarah stood with her head bowed, exhaustion weighing on her after the long night. The baby had been restless, turning and kicking as if sensing the tension around them. She placed a hand on her belly, trying to soothe her child and herself. "The white woman will stay," Chief Mako declared, causing a ripple of surprise through the assembly, but not freely. "She will be watched. She will work. She will learn our ways." His stern gaze fell on Sarah. "Until her child is born and strong enough to travel. Then the council will meet again to decide what comes next." Relief washed over Sarah like a cool stream after days in the desert. It wasn't freedom, but it was life for her and her child. She looked up to find Nakohe watching her, his face impassive, but his eyes holding a warmth that told her he had hoped for this outcome. "Nakohe," the chief continued, "you brought her here. She is your responsibility. If she brings harm to our people, that harm will fall on you as well." Nakohe nodded solemnly, accepting the burden without hesitation. "This is a mistake," Dakota declared, stepping forward with fists clenched. "Father, the council has spoken." Chief Mako interrupted firmly. "As have I. It is done." He raised his hand in a gesture that brooked no further argument. "Go now. Prepare for the day's hunt." Dakota's jaw tightened, his dark eyes flashing with barely contained fury. He shot a venomous glance at Sarah before turning away, his rigid shoulders broadcasting his disapproval to all who watched. As the council dispersed, Kiona approached Sarah, taking her arm with gentle firmness. "Come, you need rest, then work begins." Nakohe intercepted them, speaking briefly to Kiona in Apache before turning to Sarah. "You stay in Kiona's wiki up," he explained. "She teach you our ways. Better you learn quickly." "Thank you," Sarah said, the simple words inadequate for the gratitude she felt. "For everything." Something flickered across his face, an emotion Sarah couldn't name. "I do what is right," he said simply. His gaze dropped to where the leather cord of his eagle pendant was just visible at her neck. "You wear it?" "Yes," she replied, her hand moving instinctively to touch the carved figure beneath her dress. "It gave me courage." Nakohe nodded, seemingly pleased. "Eagle is strength, protection." He hesitated, then added, "I carved it during Vision Quest, before I knew I would find you." The significance of this admission wasn't lost on Sarah. He had given her something deeply personal, created during a sacred time. Before she could respond, Kiona gently tugged her arm, reminding her of her exhaustion and need for rest. "Go," Nakohe said. "We talk later." In the days that followed, Sarah was introduced to the rhythms of Apache life. Rising with the sun, she joined the women in their daily tasks, grinding corn into meal, preparing food, tanning hides, weaving baskets. Her swollen belly limited her mobility, but she threw herself into every task with determination, eager to prove her willingness to contribute. The tribe's reaction to her presence remained mixed. Some, particularly the younger warriors who followed Dakota, made their hostility clear, spitting when she passed, refusing to acknowledge her existence. Others watched with cautious curiosity, their initial wariness slowly giving way to grudging acceptance as they saw her work without complaint. The children were the first to warm to her, drawn by her different appearance and the novelty of her growing belly. They would gather around when she sat to rest, touching her pale skin and golden brown hair with wondering fingers. Sarah taught them simple English words, and they, in turn, helped her learn Apache phrases, laughing delightedly at her attempts to pronounce the unfamiliar sounds. Kiona proved a patient teacher and unexpected ally. The medicine woman showed Sarah which plants could be used for healing, which for dye, which for food. She explained the significance of designs woven into baskets and beaded onto clothing, stories told through patterns passed down through generations. Nakohe kept his distance during those first days, observing from afar as Sarah gradually found her place within the community. She would catch glimpses of him, teaching young boys to track, conferring with the chief, repairing weapons, and occasionally feel his eyes on her, watching, assessing. It was nearly a week after the council's decision when he approached her directly. Sarah was sitting outside Kiona's wickiup, sorting through herbs in the late afternoon sun when his shadow fell across her work. "You learn well," he observed, nodding at the neat piles of sorted plants. Sarah looked up, shielding her eyes against the sunlight that haloed his tall figure. "Kiona is a good teacher," she replied. "Though I have much still to learn, walk with me," he said, extending his hand to help her up, "if you are not too tired." Sarah accepted his assistance, her heart quickening at the brief contact. "I'd like that." As they moved away from the busy center of the village toward a quiet path that followed the nearby stream, Sarah was acutely aware of the eyes that followed them, some curious, some disapproving. Nakohe seemed unconcerned, his stride relaxed but measured to accommodate her slower pace. Whatever came next, Sarah sensed it would shape the course of her future among the Apache, and perhaps Nakohe's as well. The stream burbled peacefully over smooth stones, its gentle voice a counterpoint to the silence that stretched between Sarah and Nakohe as they walked. The late afternoon sun bathed the landscape in golden light, softening the rugged terrain into something almost gentle. "You have made enemies here," Nakohe said finally, his words direct, but his tone without accusation. "And some friends also, I think." Sarah nodded, watching a hawk circle lazily overhead. "Takoda will never accept me." "Takoda's heart is wounded," Nakohe replied. His wife and daughter were at White River. He found their bodies himself. He glanced at her, his dark eyes reflecting old sorrows. Hatred easier than forgiveness sometimes. Sarah absorbed this information, understanding better now the depth of Takoda's animosity. "I'm sorry for his loss," she said quietly, "but I had no part in it. He knows this, with his mind." Nakohe tapped his chest. "Heart different story." They reached a bend in the stream where a fallen log created a natural place to rest. Nakohe helped Sarah lower herself onto it, then sat beside her, leaving a respectful distance between them. "May I ask you something?" Sarah ventured after a moment. Nakohe inclined his head, signaling his willingness to listen. "Nah. Why did you really save me?" she asked, the question that had been circling in her mind since that first day in the snow. "You knew what it might cost you. You knew how your people would react." He was silent for so long that Sarah wondered if he would answer at all. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost meditative. "My father was shaman. He taught me to read signs, in stars, in animals, in dreams." Nakohe's gaze followed the flowing water. "During Vision Quest, I see eagle 3 times. Each time, it circle then fly to same place, where I find you." He turned to look at her directly. "This not accident." "You believe your spirits led you to me?" Sarah asked, trying to understand. "I believe Great Spirit has purpose we not always see," he corrected gently. "Sometimes we must trust and follow, even when path difficult." Sarah considered his words, her hand absently moving to touch the eagle pendant. "My husband would have said it was God's providence," she mused. "Different words, perhaps, but a similar idea." Nakohe nodded, seeming pleased by her understanding. "Your God, our spirits, maybe not so different." They sat in companionable silence for a time, watching the stream's endless journey and the changing light as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. "Tell me about your husband," Nakohe said, surprising her. Sarah smiled softly, memories of William bringing both pain and comfort. "He was a teacher before we married, loved books, ideas. Believed people should be free to determine their own path." Her smile faded. "The war changed him. He came home different, restless, unable to settle. That's when he started talking about Oregon." "He was good man," Nakohe observed, "to want better life for you, for child." "Yes," Sarah agreed, her throat tight with emotion. "He would have been a wonderful father." "Child will know of him through you," Nakohe said simply. "But through stories you tell." The baby chose that moment to deliver a particularly energetic kick, causing Sarah to gasp and place both hands on her belly. Nakohe looked alarmed. "Pain?" "No," she assured him, laughing softly. "Just a very active baby. Here." Without thinking, She reached for his hand and placed it on the side of her belly where the baby was moving. Nako froze, his expression a mixture of wonder and uncertainty as he felt the strong kicks against his palm. For a brief moment, the barriers of culture and circumstance fell away, leaving just two people sharing the miracle of new life. "Strong warrior," he murmured, a rare smile transforming his usually stoic features. "Or a very determined young lady," Sarah countered, enjoying his reaction. Nakohe withdrew his hand slowly, but the connection between them remained, something subtle yet profound having shifted in those few heartbeats. A sound from behind them broke the moment. They turned to see Takoda standing several yards away, his face dark with disapproval as he observed their interaction. "Chief asks for you," he said to Nakohe in English, deliberately excluding Sarah from any courtesy. "Hunting party returns with news." Nakohe stood, his posture once again formal and reserved. "I come." He turned to Sarah. "Can you return alone?" "Of course," she assured him, struggling a bit to rise from the log. Both men watched her efforts. Nakohe with concern, Takoda with contempt. "I will check on you later," Nakohe promised before following Takoda, who had already turned to stride back toward the village. Sarah made her way back slowly, her mind replaying the conversation with Nakohe, particularly the moment he had felt her baby move. There had been something in his eyes then, something that made her heart beat faster in a way it hadn't since William's death. She was so lost in thought that she almost collided with a group of women returning from gathering wild berries. Among them was Dolly, a young widow who had recently begun to show Sarah small kindnesses, teaching her to bead in the Apache style, correcting her pronunciation of words, sharing food from her own cooking fire. "You walk with Nakohe," Dolly observed, falling into step beside Sarah. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Sarah replied, unsure what to make of the woman's tone. Dolly glanced at her with knowing eyes. "Be careful. Some say he looks at you as man looks at woman, not as warrior looks at responsibility." Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks. "That's not, he doesn't. I say only what others whisper," Dolly interrupted with a slight shrug. "Takoda already tells warriors that Nakohe betrays ancestors by bringing white woman to our hearts. If more happens..." She left the implication hanging. Sarah's momentary happiness dimmed as reality reasserted itself. However genuine the connection she felt with Nakohe might be, they lived in a world that would view any deepening of that connection as a betrayal of his people, of her late husband, of the unspoken boundaries between their races. By the time she reached Kiona's wickiup, Sarah's heart was heavy with the complications of her situation. The medicine woman took one look at her face and nodded sagely. "Oh, do you see truth now?" she said, handing Sarah a cup of herbal tea. "Path never simple." "What should I do?" Sarah asked, gratefully accepting the warm drink. Kiona's weathered face creased in a rare smile. "What women always do, be stronger than men think possible." Before Sarah could respond, a commotion erupted in the center of the village. Warriors gathered around the returning hunting party, voices raised in excitement or alarm. She couldn't tell which from a distance. "Something happens," Kiona said, stepping outside to look. "Something bad." Sarah joined her, instinctively placing a protective hand over her belly as she watched the gathering crowd. She couldn't make out the words being spoken, but the tension in the air was palpable. One of the young boys who had taken to following Sarah around came running toward them, his face alight with the importance of his news. "Soldiers!" he exclaimed in broken English, clearly wanting Sarah to understand. "Blue coats, come this way!" Sarah's blood ran cold. Whatever fragile place she had begun to carve for herself in this community could be destroyed in an instant if soldiers discovered her here. Worse, The village itself could be in danger. Across the crowd, her eyes found Nakohe's. Even at a distance, she could see the concern in his face as he looked toward her. In that moment, Sarah knew with absolute certainty that whatever came next, their fates were now inextricably linked. Night descended swiftly over the village, the usual evening activities replaced by urgent preparation. Warriors painted their faces and checked their weapons, while women hurriedly packed essential items into bundles that could be quickly carried if evacuation became necessary. Children were hushed, fires dampened to reduce visible smoke, and scouts dispatched in all directions to track the soldiers' movements. Sarah stood outside Kiona's wickiup, watching the controlled chaos with growing apprehension. The village that had reluctantly become her temporary home now faced a threat she had inadvertently brought to their doorstep. For what reason would soldiers be in this remote area if not searching for missing settlers? "It's my fault," she whispered to Kiona, who was sorting medicinal herbs into transportable pouches. "They must be looking for survivors from my wagon train." The old woman's hands never paused in their work. "Maybe yes, maybe no. Bluecoats need no reason to hunt Apache." Chief Mako had called a war council immediately upon receiving the scouts' report. Now, as the meeting concluded, warriors dispersed to their assigned tasks, their expressions grim but determined. Nakohe emerged from the chief's wickiup, deep in conversation with two other men. Their discussion appeared heated, with sharp gestures and tense postures. Sarah's attention was diverted by Takoda striding purposefully toward her, his face twisted with barely contained rage. Several warriors followed in his wake, their expressions similarly hostile. "This is your doing," he accused, stopping mere inches from her. "You brought them here." "No," Sarah protested, instinctively backing away. "I never—" "You signal them somehow," Takoda continued, advancing on her, "or they track you. Either way, their presence is because of you." "That's not true," she insisted, though doubt gnawed at her. Could the soldiers have followed Nakohe's tracks when he carried her from the mountain pass? "Takoda." Nakohe's voice cut through the confrontation as he approached swiftly. "Enough! Tell her what scouts say," Takoda demanded, turning to face him. "Tell her they search valley by valley, asking at every settlement about missing white woman with child." He pointed accusingly at Sarah. "They hunt her while we become hunted." Nakohe's jaw tightened, but he didn't deny Takoda's words. "Chief has decided," he said firmly. "We move village tonight to Canyon Hide Place." "And her?" Takoda asked, gesturing dismissively toward Sarah. "Do we bring danger with us?" Nakohe stepped between Takoda and Sarah, his stance protective, but his voice calm. "She comes. Chief has spoken." "She slows us down," one of the other warriors interjected. "She cannot travel fast enough." "I can keep up," Sarah said, finding her voice. "I won't be a burden." Takoda scoffed. "You already burden. Every step Nakohe wastes on you endangers our people." He addressed the gathered warriors. "I say, we leave her for soldiers to find. Let her go back to her kind." Murmurs of agreement rose from several of the men. Sarah felt the ground shift beneath her feet as the tenuous acceptance she had begun to build crumbled. Even those who had shown her kindness might now see her as too great a risk. "No." Nakohe's voice was quiet but carried an authority that silenced the murmurs. "That not our way. We do not abandon those under our protection. She is not one of us," Takoda shouted, his control finally breaking. "She never will be, and your weakness for her will destroy us all." The accusation hung in the air, its implications clear to everyone present. Takoda wasn't just questioning Nakohe's judgment, he was suggesting something deeper, more personal in his motives for protecting Sarah. Nakohe's expression hardened, but before he could respond, Chief Mako's commanding voice cut through the tension. "Enough!" The chief approached, his presence immediately commanding respect from all present. Scouts report 20, maybe 30 soldiers, moving slow, searching carefully. His penetrating gaze swept over the assembled group. "We leave within hour to High Canyon." He turned to Takoda. "You lead rear guard. Watch for followers." The clear dismissal in his tone left no room for argument. Takoda gave his father a stiff nod before stalking away, his supporters trailing behind him. Chief Mako regarded Sarah thoughtfully. "You ride with Kiona," he decided. "Stay close to Nakohe." "Thank you," Sarah said, relief washing over her. "I'm sorry for bringing this trouble to your people." The chief's weathered face revealed nothing of his thoughts. "More trouble find Apache with or without you, white woman." With that, he turned and walked away, calling orders to finalize the evacuation. Nakohe remained, his expression troubled as he watched Takoda gathering his supporters on the far side of the village. "He hates me," Sarah observed quietly. "Not you," Nakohe corrected. "What you represent." He sighed, running a hand through his long hair. "And now he questions my honor as warrior." Sarah felt a pang of guilt. "Because of me," Nakohe turned to her then, his dark eyes intense, "because he cannot see past his pain to truth." He glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard before continuing in a lower voice. "Sarah, listen carefully. If soldiers find us, if fighting starts—" He hesitated. "You must be ready to go with them." She stared at him, stunned. "You want me to leave?" "Want? No." His face revealed a flash of emotion quickly suppressed. "But your child deserves chance at life. If battle comes, you go with your people, for baby's sake." Sarah felt as if the ground had dropped away beneath her feet. The thought of returning to white society had once been her only wish. But now— "They're not my people anymore," she whispered, surprising herself with the truth of it. "Not really." Something flickered in Nakohe's eyes. Hope, perhaps, or understanding. Before he could respond, Kiona approached, carrying 2 packed bundles. "Time to go," the medicine woman announced. "Long journey tonight." As they prepared to depart, Sarah caught sight of Takoda watching them from across the village, his expression dark with suspicion and resolve. Whatever happened in the coming days, she knew with cold certainty that the chief's son would be waiting for any opportunity to prove his accusations right. And with soldiers drawing closer by the hour, that opportunity might come all too soon. The night wrapped around them like a protective cloak as the Apache moved through the landscape with practiced stealth. No drum announced their departure. No call guided their way, only the whispered instructions of scouts and the silent knowledge of a people accustomed to sudden flight. Sarah rode behind Kiona on a paint mare, her arms wrapped around the older woman's thin waist, her swollen belly making the position awkward and uncomfortable. They traveled in the center of the group, surrounded by families with young children and elders too frail to walk far. Warriors flanked the procession, alert for any sign of danger, while scouts ranged ahead and behind. Nakohe moved between the front and rear of the column, checking on stragglers, conferring with scouts, his keen eyes constantly scanning the terrain. Occasionally, his path would bring him alongside Sarah and Kiona, and he would inquire briefly about Sarah's condition before continuing his rounds. The journey was arduous. What might have been a half-day's travel in daylight became a grueling overnight trek as they followed winding game trails, crossed shallow streams to mask their scent, and avoided open ground where moonlight might reveal their presence. Sarah bit her lip against the discomfort, determined not to show weakness. Her back ached fiercely, and the baby seemed to protest the constant motion with increasingly forceful kicks. "Almost there," Kiona murmured over her shoulder as they began to ascend a narrow path that wound up the side of a steep ravine. "Canyon safe place. Soldiers never find." Sarah nodded, too exhausted to speak. Dawn was approaching, the eastern sky lightening to a pale grey. She could see little of their surroundings in the pre-dawn dimness, only the silhouettes of those ahead and the vague impression of towering rock walls rising on either side. The path grew steeper, forcing many to dismount and lead their horses. Sarah slid awkwardly from the mare's back, grateful for Kiona's steadying hand. They continued on foot, Sarah leaning heavily on a walking stick that Dolly had pressed into her hands before they departed. "Water ahead," someone called softly from the front of the column. "Rest soon." The promise of rest gave Sarah renewed strength. One step, then another. Her legs trembled with fatigue, and sweat dampened her clothing despite the cool morning air. The baby had grown strangely quiet within her, as if sensing the need for endurance. Rounding a bend in the trail, Sarah's breath caught at the sight before her. The narrow ravine opened into a hidden canyon, a secret world of surprising beauty. A small waterfall cascaded down one rock face, feeding a clear pool that gave rise to a stream winding through the canyon floor. Cottonwood trees and willows grew along the water's edge, while natural terraces rose in tiers along the canyon walls, providing multiple levels for shelter and defense. "Najuji," Kiona said softly, using the Apache word for beautiful place. "Yes," Sarah agreed, momentarily forgetting her exhaustion. "It's perfect." The tribe quickly dispersed to establish their temporary camp. Those who had carried lightweight wiki-up frames began setting up shelters on the various terraces. Others unpacked food supplies, tended to horses, or established guard positions at strategic points. Sarah helped where she could, organizing Kiona's healing supplies and assisting Dolly in setting up a cooking fire. The activity kept her mind from the ache in her lower back, which had intensified since they arrived at the canyon. Midday found her sitting by the stream, soaking her swollen feet in the cool water while sorting through a basket of gathered herbs. She worked methodically, separating healing plants from those used for cooking, as Kiona had taught her. The task was soothing, requiring just enough concentration to distract from her discomfort without taxing her weary mind. "You should rest." Nakohe's voice startled her from her reverie. He stood a few paces away, his face showing signs of the night's exertion, though his posture remained vigilant. "I've rested enough," Sarah replied, offering a small smile. "Keeping busy helps." He approached, studying her with concern. "You are in pain." It wasn't a question. Sarah considered denying it, then sighed. "My back aches. The baby is heavy now." Nakohe crouched beside her, his expression thoughtful. "Kiona, say how much longer before child comes?" "Soon," Sarah answered, placing a hand on her belly. "Within weeks, perhaps days." A shadow crossed his face, and Sarah knew he was thinking of the soldiers, of the danger that still loomed over them. "The scouts," she ventured. "Any sign of them following us?" "No," Nakohe replied, "but they still search valley. May find old village site by tomorrow." He picked up a small stone, turning it over in his fingers. "We are safe here for now." "And then?" Sarah asked quietly. He met her gaze steadily. "Then we see if soldiers give up search or if they keep hunting." The unspoken question hung between them, hunting for Apache or hunting for her. "I never meant for this to happen," Sarah said, guilt weighing heavily on her. "I never wanted to put anyone in danger. I know," Nakohe assured her. You not choose to be lost in snow, just as I not choose to find you there. A hint of a smile touched his lips. Yet here we are. Despite everything, Sarah felt an answering smile form. Yes, here we are. The moment was broken by a commotion from the upper terraces. Takoda's voice carried down to them, raised in argument with another warrior. Though Sarah couldn't understand the words, the anger was unmistakable. Nakohe's expression hardened. Takoda gathers support, he explained, rising to his feet. Some warriors think we should move farther into mountains, away from soldiers, search. Is that what you think? Sarah asked, struggling to her feet, one hand pressed against her aching back. I think, Nakohe began, but stopped abruptly, his attention caught by something in Sarah's face. What is wrong? Sarah shook her head, trying to dismiss his concern, but as she straightened, a sharp pain lanced through her abdomen, causing her to gasp and double over. Nakohe caught her before she could fall, supporting her weight easily. The baby, she managed through clenched teeth as the pain receded. I think it's coming. Alarm flashed across Nakohe's face. Now. It comes now. I'm not sure, Sarah admitted as the pain subsided. It could be false pains. Sometimes they come weeks before. She broke off as another contraction seized her, this one stronger than the last. Without hesitation, Nakohe swept her into his arms and began striding toward Kiona's shelter, calling for the medicine woman as he went. The camp burst into activity around them, women hurrying to gather clean cloths and water, children being shooed away, warriors gathering to discuss this new development. Through a haze of pain, Sarah was dimly aware of being carried into a hastily prepared wiki-up, of Kiona's weathered hands examining her, of urgent conversations in Apache flowing around her. The contractions were coming faster now, leaving little doubt that her time had indeed arrived. Too soon, she gasped, fear gripping her heart. The journey must have... Shh, Kiona soothed, pressing a cup of herbal tea to Sarah's lips. Baby knows it's time. Trust. Sarah caught a glimpse of Nakohe standing at the entrance of the wiki-up, his face a mask of concern, before Dolly firmly guided him away, explaining that men had no place at a birthing. As the women prepared for the arrival of her child, Sarah heard raised voices outside, Nakohe and Takoda in heated argument. Through the pain of another contraction, she made out Takoda's angry declaration, "Soldiers will hear her cries. She endangers us all." "Ignore," Kiona instructed, wiping Sarah's forehead with a cool cloth. "Focus on baby." "Nothing else matters now," Sarah nodded, surrendering to the ancient rhythm of childbirth that transcended all boundaries of culture and circumstance. As another powerful contraction built within her, she clutched the eagle pendant that still hung around her neck, drawing strength from its connection to Nakohe and all that had brought her to this moment. Outside, the argument intensified, and then a new voice cut through the clamor, one of the scouts, his words carrying clearly even to Sarah's ears. "Soldiers, in the canyon below, they found our trail." The news hit the camp like a thunderbolt, silencing all disputes in the face of immediate danger. Sarah's eyes met Kiona's, both women understanding the impossible situation they now faced. A woman in labor, a tribe in hiding, and soldiers closing in. There would be no easy escape this time. Time seemed to compress into a series of vivid moments, each etched with painful clarity against the backdrop of danger and new life. Within the wiki-up, Sarah fought through the ancient battle of childbirth, each contraction bringing her closer to meeting her child. Outside, the Apache prepared for a different kind of battle, one that could determine all their fates. "Push now," Kiona instructed, her weathered hands steady as they had been through countless births before. Child ready to meet world. Sarah bore down with all her remaining strength, a cry escaping her lips despite her efforts to remain silent. She was dimly aware of the camp's frantic activity, warriors taking defensive positions, families retreating deeper into the canyon's hidden recesses, scouts reporting the soldiers' steady advance up the narrow trail. Between contractions, Sarah gasped. "The soldiers, they'll hear. Let them hear," Dolly said fiercely, supporting Sarah's shoulders. "This is woman's power." No shame in its voice. Another pain seized her, and Sarah surrendered to it completely, past caring who might hear her cries. All that existed was this moment, this struggle to bring forth life in the midst of chaos and uncertainty. Outside the wickiup, Nakohe stood with Chief Mako and the warriors, discussing their limited options. The canyon offered protection but also confinement. If the soldiers blocked the entrance, they would be trapped. "We should silence her," Dakota insisted, gesturing toward the wickiup where Sarah's labor continued. "Her cries guide them to us." "You would dishonor birth of child?" Chief Mako asked sharply. "Even enemies respect this sacred time." "They are not enemies to her," Dakota countered. "She is one of them. She could—" His words were interrupted by a scout rushing toward them, breathless with urgent news. "Soldiers, stop! Make camp at canyon entrance. Not advancing further today." Relief rippled through the gathering, tempered by the knowledge that tomorrow would bring renewed danger. "They wait for morning light," Nakohe observed. "Safer to enter unknown territory." Chief Mako nodded gravely. "Tonight we prepare. Tomorrow we decide, fight or find new path." As the warriors dispersed to their assigned duties, Nakohe remained, his attention fixed on the wickiup, where Sarah's labor had grown quieter, a silence more concerning than her earlier cries. Inside, Sarah lay exhausted, her strength flagging after hours of effort. The baby seemed caught, unwilling or unable to complete its journey into the world. "Something wrong," Kiona murmured, her experienced hands feeling the position of the child. Baby turned wrong way. Fear gripped Sarah's heart. She had seen women die in childbirth, had heard stories of babies lost after days of futile labor. "Help me," she whispered, clinging to Kiona's arm. "Please, don't let my baby die." The medicine woman's face revealed nothing, but her eyes held ancient knowledge and determination. "And we turn, child," she decided, motioning for Dolly to hold Sarah steady. What followed was a blur of pain, unlike anything Sarah had experienced before, as Kiona's hands worked to reposition the baby within her. She bit down on a strip of leather to keep from screaming, tears streaming down her face. Through it all, she clutched the eagle pendant, drawing strength from its connection to Nakohe, the man who had saved her once and might yet save her again, though in a different way. "Now push," Kiona commanded when the manipulation was complete. "Push with all spirit." Sarah gathered her remaining strength, bearing down with renewed determination. This time, she felt movement. Real progress as her child finally began to emerge. Outside, the sunset painted the canyon walls in shades of crimson and gold, a fiery backdrop to the tense vigil Nakohe kept near the wickiup. He had not left his post, despite the need for preparation elsewhere. Something bound him to this spot, to this moment, to the woman whose arrival had changed everything. A new sound broke the evening stillness. Not Sarah's cries of pain, but the thin, indignant wail of a newborn taking its first breath. Nakohe's heart leaped at the sound, life against all odds, new beginning in the face of potential ending. He stepped forward, drawn by an irresistible pull, only to find Takoda blocking his path. "Your white woman lives," Takoda said, his voice hard but something uncertain flickering in his eyes. And now there is a child who is neither fully of her world nor ours. What place will it have? Before Nakohe could answer, the Wikiup's entrance flap was pushed aside, and Kiona emerged, her expression serene despite the blood on her hands and clothing. "A son," she announced, loud enough for all nearby to hear. "Strong lungs, strong spirit, mother lives also." Murmurs spread through the watching crowd, some approving, some still skeptical, but all acknowledging the power of new life. "Nakohe," Kiona called, beckoning him forward. "She asks for you." Takoda stepped aside without further comment, his internal conflict visible in the tight set of his jaw. This battle, at least, was not his to fight. Nakohe ducked into the dim interior of the Wikiup. Sarah lay on a bed of furs, her face pale with exhaustion, but radiant with the fierce joy of motherhood. In her arms, wrapped in a soft deerskin blanket, lay a tiny red-faced infant with a shock of dark hair. "A son," Sarah whispered, her voice weak but steady. "William's son." Nakohe knelt beside her, overwhelmed by the tableau before him. "He is beautiful," he said simply, reaching out to touch the child's tiny hand. 5 perfect fingers curled reflexively around his larger one, a grip surprisingly strong for one so new to the world. "I want to name him Daniel," Sarah continued, "after my father, but I would also give him an Apache name, if that would be permitted." The request took Nakohe by surprise. "You would give him name of my people." "He was born here, among the Apache," Sarah explained, her blue eyes meeting his dark ones without hesitation. "Because of your courage, your compassion. He should carry that heritage with him, whatever comes next." Nakohe felt something shift within him, a certainty that transcended the immediate dangers they still faced. "I will speak with Chief Mako," he promised. "There is name, Taluta. It means blood red, for sunrise that brings new day." Sarah smiled, the simple expression transforming her tired face. "Daniel Taluta." She tested the combination. "It's perfect." A commotion outside interrupted the moment. Raised voices, urgent movement. The flap of the Wikiup was thrust aside as Dolly entered, her expression tense. "Soldiers send messenger," she reported. "Under white flag. They asked to speak at dawn." Reality crashed back upon them, the soldiers waiting below, the tribe's precarious position, the uncertain future that awaited them all. Yet as Nakohe looked at Sarah and her newborn son, he felt not despair, but resolve. Some bonds, once formed, could not be broken by circumstance or convention. Some paths, once joined, could not be separated by the arbitrary boundaries of race or allegiance. "And whatever comes," he said softly, taking Sarah's free hand in his, "we face together." In the quiet Wikiup, as dusk deepened into night and a new life took its first tentative breaths, a different kind of family was born. One forged not by blood or tradition, but by choice and courage and the simple, profound recognition of humanity in the eyes of another.